Okay, class, welcome to another motivational aspect of sport. We're going to do with part two of the intro. Last week, we talked a lot about some esoteric things, some things you might want to consider when you begin to think about the process or actually what constitutes motivation. This week, I'm going to just show you a couple of things that I actually use in my practice. Um, this is how I explain things to people, how I tell them about the process. Sometimes well, oftentimes I have more than just the athlete in front of me. Sometimes I have the athlete and their significant other. Sometimes I have the athlete, significant other, their coach, their trainer, and occasionally I've had the sponsors, their money people, right there with them. So I'm casting a wide net, and I've got to be able to explain things to everybody. So we're all have our oars in the water and we're all pulling in the same direction. After all, the object is performance enhancement and getting the athlete to where they want to be to improve themselves. So I'm just going to go through a couple of different things here, and some of them I think you're welcome to, and see if they can help you in the way that you explain things to your peeps. Anyway, let's get into it, shall we? All right. Here's one I call the reality check. There are expectations and outcomes. And what I mean by this is anytime you go into a competitive environment, anytime you go into a competition, you're going to have certain expectations, and the certain expectations are going to be based upon your history. How have you performed in the past? What is the typical outcome? How good are you? Really, really. And so you have these expectations, and they are either supported or or they are challenged by the outcomes. So there's only four possible combinations here. So let's just take them from the top. Here at the top, we have positive and positive. If you go into a competition and you have a history of competing at a very, very high level, your expectations are probably pretty high that you're going to prevail. You're going to do well. Probably going to win. So you have high expectations, and then after the competition, sure enough, your high expectations were met with a positive outcome. You did win. So positive expectation, positive outcome. Any problem there? Nah, probably not really. And as a matter of fact, I usually go a little bit further and say, is there any emotion associated with this? Well, probably not. Yeah, maybe a little bit of yes. All right. Yeah, I got it. Or something like that, maybe a little confirmation, but you're not doing high fives to everybody because you knew that you were going to compete at that high level and you're probably going to prevail. So anyway, all right, well, let's take a look at the second one, the two minuses. You have negative expectations because, well, you suck. And if you're not very good at this, you don't have high expectations, so you don't expect very much. And after the competition, sure enough, you get your backside handed to you, and your low expectations were met with low outcomes. So, question I always ask is there a problem there? Well, no, there really isn't, because you're not that disappointed. You didn't have the expectation, you didn't expect very much to begin with. And so, well, there you go. All right, let's go to the next one here, because now we get into the mixed bags. Again, you think you suck. You've never had done very well in this kind of competition, and yet after the competition, wow, you won. How did that happen? Now, the question I ask here of my patients is there a problem there? And a lot of times they say no, but really there is. There is a problem because it begs the question as to whether your expectations or the outcome of this particular engagement better represents which one better represents the true you. Were your expectations wrong? Or was this outcome here just happenstance? It just happened and you're as surprised as everybody. The point is, regardless of what the reason is, it's going to distract you. You're going to be questioning things. You're going to, wow, man, I don't know. Cool. Wow, I don't know how that happened. And it's not necessarily going to keep you awake, but it's going to get your attention and it will take your mind away. Okay, let's quit beating around the bush. Let's talk about the one that everybody in in the audience here, all of us in the class, have experienced at one time or another. You know you're good. You've demonstrated that you're good. You have a history of being good, and you have these high expectations. and for whatever reason, you got your backside handed to you. Oh my goodness. Oh, the embarrassment. Oh, the shame. Oh, well, is there a problem there is the question, and of course there is, because unlike the one where you didn't have any expectations, your expectations were low and the outcome was high, that merely distracted you in a minor sense. This one right here, when you have it happen, if you have it happen once, most athletes will probably brush it off and just say, "Well, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Just didn't it wasn't on my A game today." But if it happens again and it happens again, that stuff's going to keep you up at 3 in the morning looking at the ceiling fan, because you're going to seriously question as to whether your expectations were were reality or the outcome. And let's just talk about that for a moment. Of the two, which is reality? Is it your expectations or is it your outcome? Well, you know what? The outcomes, if they tend to be consistent and you are consistently disappointed in the outcomes, my advice and my advice to all my patients is you might want to go back over here and re-examine your expectations. Perhaps, and I'm going to say it because that's what I get paid to do, perhaps you're just not as good as you think you are, and you need to get back to training and pay attention a little bit more. And by the way, at the very bottom there, the question mark and the exclamation point. I had a patient, good grief, probably a dozen, 15 years ago, whatever, uh, say, "Well, hey, doc, look, what if I have no expectation? What if I've never done this before? I have no experience whatsoever." And I said, "Well, that's interesting. Well, okay, then that's a question mark. And then the outcome is going to be a surprise. Win, lose, or draw, good, bad, or ugly, it's going to be a surprise. However, let me make this point. This can only happen once, because the next time you do it, you're coming in with the results here from this outcome. So the question mark is marked by the exclamation point, but the next time you go in, it's going to be either positive or negative as far as your expectations are concerned. So, all right, let's get on to something else, shall we? Oh my goodness. Okay, I know you horror. You thinking analytic geometry, right? No, no, no. Come on. Just follow me along. Follow along with me on this one right here. Really, we're dealing with a three-dimensional Cartesian right here, an X, Y, and Z axis. And the real important ones are the ability here, ability at the very top. You see that you can. At the bottom, on the negative side, you cannot. Attitude over on the right-hand side is flanked by you either will because of your attitude, or on the far left, you will not. So ability is can or cannot, attitude is will or will not. So that forms a two-dimensional Cartesian. So we get four quarters there, and we'll talk about that in just a second. The opportunity here, the opportunity is the entry point to this. Um, if you have all the ability, you have great attitude, but you have no opportunity, that's the first thing that I need to determine when I'm talking to a patient. If their ability is such and their attitude is such, well, okay, that's fine, but we can't talk about that until we find out if you've got the opportunity. If you have the opportunity, it goes away, and now we can talk about ability and attitude. I don't know whether I made that clear or not, but if you don't have the opportunity for whatever reason, uh, well, then we don't need to proceed any further, because you don't have the opportunity, so you can. Doesn't matter what your ability or your attitude is, you don't have the opportunity, and it's not going to happen. So we'll come back to this here in just a second. So there it is. Opportunity is either a yes or no. It's kind of like an on-off switch. It's either, if it's yes, we can continue, and we'll take opportunity out of the mix, and we'll just turn our attentions to the attitude of whether you will or you will not, and your ability whether you can or you cannot. Okay. Okay. Remember that your attitude speaks to whether you will or you will not do something. And it can address a number of different things: your desire, your engagement, your commitment, your discipline, your uh, so many. Oh, and social support there too. Whether you've got people behind you that are supporting your decision and the path that you've chosen. So attitude works, but it really has to do with whether you will or you will not. Now, uh, I often make this distinction here because we're careless with the language. A lot of times we are very careless with the language. Uh, say I'm sitting here with one of my friends and say, "Hey, man, why don't you come on by? Why don't you stop by after work and we'll have a beer?" No, I can't. You can't? What do you yeah, you get in your car, you come over, and I give you a beer, and we have huh? What do you mean you can't? "No, man, I gotta go, I gotta go to the store, and I've gotta go pick up so and so," and whoa, 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 whoa. It's not a fact then. We're really not talking about your ability to do it, whether you can or you cannot. It's actually your attitude. You've got to stop at the store and you've got to pick up X, Y, and Z because you regard it as being more important than coming over and having a beer with me. So, will or will not be very specific about this. Now, it may seem like I'm being overly picky on this, but really, words mean things, guys. So, mean what you say and say what you mean. So, attitude, we'll come back and see that in just a few minutes. Ability is a little bit different. Here, this is actually your talent. Um, and sometimes it has to do with permission and your perceived ability. Sometimes again, it dances lightly with opportunity because maybe your physician is saying, well, okay, we can let you come in, but you can only go 50% and da 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 da. So ability, you have the ability, you can or you cannot, relative to your belief, relative to the permission that you're granted. So again, what we're trying to do here is be able to graph this, and I'll be able to show you this in just a second here. Let's get back to the three-dimensional Cartesian. If I take opportunity out of here, then we're dealing with four quadrants. We're dealing with the upper left here, where you can, but you will not. We're dealing with the upper right, where you can and you will, the lower right, where you will but you cannot, and then the lower left, where you will not and you cannot. So, what does that really mean? I want you to pay attention to the just the lines going from will to will not, can to cannot, and we'll talk about it. This is what it really comes down to, and this is how I explain things to my patients and whomever else happens to be there. Because once again, here we are as can and cannot, will and will not. Now, let's take quadrant three down here: cannot and will not. Simply put, I never see patients here. They cannot and they will not. It's disengagement, discouragement. They cannot do it and they wouldn't do it. So it doesn't interest them. There's no reason why they would come and seek my services. So down there in quadrant three, I don't see patients there. Let's go up to quadrant one. You can, but you will not. Occasionally, very, very occasionally, I see patients here. The one that comes to mind every time I give this lecture, I think about a gymnast that I had. And she was 16 years old and she was an elite gymnast, which means it's a special class. It's not just that she's really good, but elite means that she is gunning to be an Olympic hopeful. And she is very, 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 very talented. But it was her whole world. And her parents and coach brought her in to see me because she just decided. She went into gym one day and said, "You know what? I don't want to do this anymore." Now you got to understand something. She's been doing this 5, 6, 7 hours a day, 6 days a week since she was 3. So she's been doing this for 13 years. And right at the cusp, right when she was getting ready to wear the cool jacket and do the hi mom photo op, et cetera, et cetera. Nope. She said, sorry, don't want to do it anymore. I'm done. I'm done. And a matter of fact, I'm done with homeschooling and everything else. I want to go to high school and I want to be a cheerleader. Well, ultimately she was, and the parents and the coach brought her into me, and I just looked at her and I looked at them and I said, well, what do you want me to do? She didn't want to do it. And you can't make her. And I looked at her and I said, do you want to do this? Are you serious? You're going to regret this. I have a feeling that you will, but are you serious? Nope, I don't want to do it anymore. I've made my mind up. Wow. Ultimately, we found that, and this should come as no surprise to anybody, but she discovered boys. And she ultimately became a high school cheerleader. She was one hell of a cheerleader. Hell, she was an elite gymnast looking for the Olympic team. But anyway, so occasionally I do see somebody right here, but very, very rarely. Where I see the majority of my patients, let's cast our attention down to uh, quadrant four, where you cannot, but you will. This is frustration and embarrassment. Where I see this most often is players coming off of injured reserve or coming out of surgery or whatever else, or therapy, or coming off a sidelining injury. Man, here the problems are not that they won't do things. It's just that they're probably, if left to their own devices, would probably write checks that their backsides couldn't cash, as we used to say in the Navy. In other words, too much. They'd overdo things and find themselves right back where they began. And then, of course, there's quadrant two. They can and they will, optimally motivated and encouraged. Now, what happens here, if we're looking at this, when I first see a patient, I find out, I determine where they fit. Are they in one or four or in two? Because once again, three, I won't see people that are in that area. They would never, well, they would never pay my fee. It never dawned on them to do so. Um, so I need to figure this. And ultimately, the movement that we are looking for is from four or one or four, into two. And then if you get into quadrant two, it's to get all the way up to the upper right hand corner where you can and you will is optimized. So that's basically it. It puts everybody on the same page, and it gives us a nice template within which to work, and so that people can see things. Even the sponsors sitting there and going, "Wow, okay, yeah, I can see that. All right, all right." So it's a very, very interesting tool. And then I just wanted to touch on this. This is just basic stuff that all of us know about. If you're a kinesiology major, you know all about exercise prescription, duration, intensity, and frequency. The points I want to make here are that there are two time elements: duration and frequency, and one energy element, and that happens to be intensity. Well, duration, of course, is how long a session lasts, and frequency is how often sessions occur. So you're dealing with two time based elements here, and only one level of exertion, and that's the intensity. So, really, when you're talking about time, you're talking about two-thirds of the equation for an exercise prescription. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because once again, people are careless with the language. And how many times have you been told by a coach that you're not trying hard enough, when in fact you're busting your butt? You're doing everything you can, but that's not what the coach means. Again, they're careless with the language, and it's not that they mean to be. It's just that it's not specifically what they mean. So, look, most literature, is it try hard or try often? Most literature and quote common practice reflexively or automatically recommend that athletes try harder for perceived motivational or performance problems. You're not giving me 100%. You're not trying hard enough, when in fact you're trying you're trying beyond what you're capable of, and you just you're trying you can't try any harder. The problem is, what coach is really saying is, give me 5 more. Give me another 5 minutes. You want to blow a coach's mind, or you want to have your own mind blown? When you say, "All right, come on, that's enough for today. Let's just do it." And you go, "Wait, wait, 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 coach. No, look, I've almost got this. Let me just do it a couple more times. Watch, just let me do it a couple more times." That's magic to a coach's ears. So I stand back and just, "Okay, all right, hot shot, let's go. Let's see what you got." That's what they're talking about. It's not that you're not trying hard enough. It's that you're not trying often enough, or you're not trying long enough. So it's really getting back to those two-thirds of the exercise prescription are time elements. Only one of them is energy dependent, and that is the intensity. And then, just to finalize things, just to kind of give you a little bit of something to illustrate time on task, et cetera, and performance and the emotional arousal. This is what's known as the inverted U, and it applies to a great many things. Anyway, it's again, I'm sorry, I don't mean to get into graphs and everything else, but come on, if you're an exercise scientist, you're going to get real used to graphs, and I'm sure you can see this. Anyway, on the far left, their performance from poor up to good. And then the base here is emotional arousal, from low, under aroused, optimally aroused, and then over aroused. And here you get poor performance at both ends of this U. the point to be made here is that you can be overly jazzed. Performance goes up as arousal goes up, as emotional arousal goes up, but only to a certain point. Up here, right at maximum performance, right there at the PERF, that is optimal. But that is also your peak, beyond which additional emotional arousal is going to get you to be careless and drop your guard, and injuries right here. After this, you go over aroused, you risk injury. Now, it's unique to every sport, but the parenthetical range, the thing I always like to illustrate is that from the M here to the E, that right here illustrates your performance zone. That is your optimal performance zone. Anything down here too low is under aroused. Anything over and above is over aroused. So this again tends to illustrate that it's not a point on a line. You've got some parentheses here from the M to the E, going from maximum to performance. And you can be up there and still be optimally aroused. All right, well, just and finally, this is just kind of a parting shot. It's different from different sports. Now, golf, of course, this is not to scale, of course, but golf is repetitive. Golf is not particularly demanding as far as physical strength is concerned, but you are out there. Anybody who plays golf will tell you that it takes you about 3 hours for an average round of golf. 3 hours, of which you're probably taking club in hand and hitting the ball maybe 10 minutes. Maybe. So golf is down here. It's on the low emotional arousal. Weightlifting, powerlifting, on the other hand, is a single effort. It's one explosive movement. So these two arousals and emotional arousals are very, very different. But I just do this to illustrate the difference, because I think you would all agree that even in just a track event, a 100-meter sprint is a hell of a different animal than a marathon. 26.2 miles. So again, the amount of arousal here, it differs in its width as well as its depth and its height. So, all right, well, that'll keep you occupied for a little bit, and I hope you enjoyed that. Go back and check this out. And feel free to use these in your with your athletes, and see if you can go ahead and play with some of this with your own performance. And I'll see you next week. Stay safe.